Now, just to go back to a story that we mentioned a few minutes ago, the Australian senator who has arrived back home after being briefly detained whilst trying to investigate Sri Lanka's human rights record. Green Senator Lee Rhiannon and a New Zealand Greens politician, Jan Logie, say they were about to host a news conference when they were detained by immigration officials. The pair were accused of breaching visa laws. Well, the Green Senator Lee Rhiannon is in Canberra for us. Just explain for us what happened.
It was the last day of our visit to Sri Lanka. It was a fact-finding delegation. Originally there was to be 3 MPs, but unfortunately and disappointingly the Malaysian MP was not given a visa by Sri Lanka. And we were having a series of meetings on Sunday morning, and in the midst of these meetings with a range of lawyers, religious leaders and people from non-government organisations, 4 immigration officials arrived. They asked for our passports. They took our passports and they told us to return to our hotel. I was obviously concerned about these developments, but it was a real insight into what many Sri Lankans obviously live with. The people who had helped arrange these meetings and who we met with became quite fearful, concerned, distressed while this was going on. One had her identification pass confiscated while she drove us back to the hotel, and they took a while to return that pass. It was quite unnecessary. And I thought the way this played out was really quite unnecessary, and it does not reflect well on the Sri Lankan government. And
to just put this into context, of course, the Sri Lankans were presumably annoyed that you'd gone on a tourist visa. You are highlighting this because the Commonwealth summit is coming up this week. What do you think international leaders should do? Do you think people should go to that summit or not?
Well, we didn't break our visa requirements, and the Australian government actually had informed the Sri Lankan government that I was attending. The Greens have been, within many community groups, have not supported CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, being held in Sri Lanka. This is a government that's been accused of war crimes, and yes, those war crimes have not been investigated, but that's where I think the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, I understand he has called for an independent international investigation. And what is happening in Sri Lanka...
What people like David Cameron, though, say is that rather than staying in your Western capitals, you should go to Sri Lanka and put the pressure on the government there. Because this is about the killing of many Tamils, 40,000 as estimated by the United Nations during the end of the Civil War.
Yes, and there was the war crimes during the actual civil war, and crimes against humanity continue. When myself and Jan Logie were in the north, we saw vast tracts of land that have been taken over by the army, where people have lost their livelihood, people who are already very poor, and now their situation is worse. We heard reports from Catholic fathers who explained about women who were raped by the army and the extent that had not heard before about Tamil children being taken away. And one newspaper office I went to, the bullets were still in the walls. They showed us the printing press that had bullets in it. Some of these incidents had happened this year in 2013. So in terms of media freedom, respect for the rule of law, human rights abuses, serious problems continue, and it really does put a cloud over this Commonwealth summit that is about to start in Colombo.
And just very briefly, we've only got a few seconds left, but you don't think Tony Abbott should be going to that. What difference will that make to the Sri Lankan government, though?
Well, we already have the Indian Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister, who are not going. That sends a strong signal. Sri Lanka should not be rewarded by being given the chair of CHOGM, this Heads of Government Commonwealth gathering, for the next 2 years. There needs to be some downgrading so the Commonwealth itself keeps its good standing. It helped to end apartheid. It now needs to work with Sri Lanka to ensure that we do gain that international investigation into war crimes and crimes against humanity. It's clearly urgently needed.
Jan Logie, thanks very much indeed for joining us there live in Canberra. We do appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just to remind you of our top